Good morning and welcome to, at least for this round, our fourth and final installment of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And if you like the topic, there's certainly a lot to explore from a lot of different angles, and in some form or other we will no doubt repeat this class within the coming year, also with a given and set number. Join us tomorrow evening, 7:30 for the Mysteries of Jewish Prayer, Part 4, and the following two Thursday evenings at 7:30 for an introduction to Kabbalah. And as I said, you'll only be able to levitate tables after just two classes, so we'll work on bigger things later. I had a unique opportunity when I was in rabbinical school in my early 20s, and full of the fire at the time, black-hatted and sits down to the knees. And I volunteered at the Fort Tryon nursing home, uptown, all the way uptown. There's no more up to go. And there, at just past 100 years old, in his early hundreds, I had the opportunity to meet Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan, who is most renowned as the founder of the Reconstructionist movement. Rabbi Kaplan at the time was in very poor physical condition, and he was wheelchair-bound and bed-bound most of the time, but he could speak, and his mind was quick as lightning. And he discussed, at the time, of course, I was approaching it from an Orthodox Jew, wondering how he could have gone so far astray. And he taught me a lot about what going astray means, where it can lead and where it goes, and where necessarily a person is, and how these things often run in cycles. So it was to my surprise when often in the mornings I would find myself assisting Rabbi Kaplan in putting his tefillin on, because he could no longer bring his arms across to reach across to do that, so I would help him put his tefillin on. What amazed me was that he put tefillin on, and insisted on doing so each and every weekday morning. And so Rabbi Kaplan talked about not so much what one does, but sometimes why one does it. He believed in a great grand concept, which you can read about in his monumental work, Judaism as a Civilization, which is that humanity was slowly, but he felt at one time surely, progressing to a higher state of humanity, a higher state of civilization, a state of love and kindness, and a mutual recognition that in fact all religious approaches and beliefs were one. I asked him how he could dismiss the supernatural God. His response was something like, I paraphrase, I cannot remember the quote, I could not possibly dismiss something that I could not possibly fathom. His belief in God as expressed in his writings is a projection of communal values, that we create these values and make for ourselves religions, ultimately to aspire to be better than we are. It was Rabbi Kaplan's feeling that religions were coming to this recognition, that humanity was coming to this recognition, and we must remember that this monumental work, while revised many times, was first published in the 20s and 30s. For many of this same philosophical bent, the Holocaust and the Second World War sort of disrupted this philosophy. It was very apparent to all that we in the post-industrial world were not necessarily on this path. That as we were producing Einsteins and Schweitzers, we were producing Hitlers and Stalins and Pol Pots and the like. This rocked his philosophy. It rocked Reconstructionism in many ways, which was not in itself, to begin with, an independent movement. Rabbi Kaplan's most profound effect upon the Jewish world has to be the fact that for decades, nearly half a century, he was the homiletics instructor at the Jewish Theological Seminary. Rabbi Kaplan had an Orthodox smicha from this country and a certain amount of training in Europe, and he was the homiletics professor at JTS. He influenced nearly half a century's worth of conservative rabbis. He changed the language of the sermon. He defined in many ways the movement. Not where it is, but where it was at least some decades ago. The generation of Kaplan-trained rabbis are themselves retiring now, is the span of time that we're talking about. There are many who espouse in other religions similar philosophies to those of Rabbi Kaplan. There are Hindus and Buddhists and Muslims and Christians who believe that all religion is heading in a single path and a single light, and all humanity somehow to a greater enlightenment. A few pieces of seemingly random information. Islam means the path of peace. Christianity means to be a Christian, one who awaits the coming of this version of Mashiach. Judaism is the way of Judah. You could not come up with a less universal or more tribal designation for a religion, perhaps, than Judaism. It is the people of Judah, relating to the kingdom of Judah, the people, the language, the land, the ethnicity, and there is very little that is universal to it. Another factoid. The Christian calendar, which was the Julian updated Gregorian calendar, is a purely solar calendar. It follows the solar year to the exclusion of all other cosmic phenomena. The Islamic calendar is a purely lunar calendar. It follows the cycle of the moon to the exclusion of all other cosmic phenomena. And of course it loses years because of this, and there isn't really a way of correcting it that they have. It's just built in to be this way. And the Jewish calendar is a combination of a lunar and a solar calendar. It is not our calendar originally. It is a Babylonian calendar. It is figured out by Babylonian astronomers and mathematicians, and the months have Babylonian names that you will not find in the Bible. They are all Babylonian deities and the Babylonian cosmology, and people pray to Tammuz and Adar and Sivan and all these other deities at one time. These are designated in various ways in the Bible, but not, of course, by this later overlay of the Babylonian names. It is also interesting to note that archaeologists have found that in synagogues of the Greco-Roman period, there are symbols of the Greco-Roman zodiac that cover the months. We have a similar zodiacal system. We are now within Leo, Lion month, the month of Av. That does not necessarily correspond, of course, to the same dates on the secular calendar, which has the same dates every year and is a purely solar calendar. And I have no idea how astrologers chart these things or mark these things. The best that I have heard is that astrology is an art rather than a science, and you don't have to necessarily all do it the same way or come out with the same results, because it's not a science. Anyway, though, this is Lion month, this is Av, and we have incorporated these symbols as well into Judaism. Recently, and by recently that is just in this last decade, the Roman Catholic Church has changed certain stances that it has held staunchly for nearly 2 millennia since its creation, since its inception. Amongst these, in the most recent missives of the Pope, include that there are other paths to salvation other than through the Church. The ambiguity in the statement is tougher on non-Catholic Christians than on non-Christians and particularly Jews. There is a new recognition on the part of the Catholic Church, going back now a good 2 decades that it's been an open dialogue, that of the concept of the Jewish people being an elder brother to the Church, and Judaism being the elder brother's way that is, according to Scripture, instructional to the younger sibling to learn from. And this, of course, is a radical departure from some of the discussions we've had in the past weeks of the view of church fathers and church elders and notables like Augustine and others and Gregory of Tours towards Jews and Judaism.